Welcome to the Kern Fire Safe Council community-wide webinar for April 2021. This is our next public information platform and an ongoing series to help us all to learn about and how to prepare for natural disasters in our communities. I'm David Stenstrom, and along with Julia Neiman, will facilitate this webinar today. This month's topic is propane safety. Could be a real bang of a title, don't you think? Anyway, in a few moments, I will introduce our speakers from Western Propane and from the Kern County Fire Department, who kindly partner with the Kern Fire Safe Council to bring us the latest in safety protocols and how we should behave with this stuff. But before we begin, here are a few facts that I think about that you should think about, and we just want to tell you about them. It's called living in California, and one of the things you have to think about when you live in California is that you might experience a natural disaster like wildfire, earthquake, or flood. And creating defensible space is part of the disaster preparedness. Another part is being ready to leave quickly or being able to shelter in place. Now, you remember, you're the best person, personally, you're the best person to help yourself and your family prepare for disaster. And you can begin by following these 5 simple steps. And remember, you're the best person to do that. These are all from Listos, California. Number 1 is get alerts. You can do that. You need to know what is going on. And you can start by signing up to Ready Kern to get disaster alerts, or go to calalerts.org and sign up. You can also call 211 for disaster alerts. Number 2 is to make a plan. Make a list of contact information for all the people you might need to reach in case of disaster. You need to share that list with your family in case you get separated. Also, share how you will evacuate and where you can all meet in the event of an emergency, and if possible, to practice your evacuation plan. Number three is kind of odd. It's a go bag. Now, what is a go bag? A go bag is we've heard stories about having to leave at a moment's notice. And so before you do have to get out and get out fast, put together this go bag. It's a bag that includes your most important items, including documents, medications, glasses, a flashlight, money in small denominations, a first aid kit, an emergency radio, warm clothes, a sleeping bag, water, emergency food, and put an extra phone charger in there too. Oh, and don't forget to take your phone. And number 4, if you're stuck and you can't get out, the roads might be closed, power may be out, you might be on your own for several days. And not to worry, if you put together a stay box. It's just the same as the go box. It includes basic supplies like food that won't spoil, the water, your medications, your glasses, a flashlight, radio, your phone charger, and for your phone. And try to store enough to last for 5 to 7 days on your own. Now, your go bag and your stay box will have a lot of overlap, but that's fine. It's better to be safe than sorry, right? And number 5 is pretty important too. It's being able to help others. Because you are prepared, you put your bag and box together and you're part of the solution, not part of the problem. So you can be ready to assist those around you who might not be able to help themselves during disaster. Remember, if an emergency occurs, stay calm, reach out to the community, and follow the directions of the sheriff, the fire department, and your local officials. Now, again, you can access all this information on our website at kernfiresafe.org. Click on resources and then click on Listos. Well, all that said, on to our speakers for this evening. First up is Felix Rincon from Western Propane. Felix works in developing and distributing safety policies in the propane service and delivery for Western, and is also one of the employee trainers. He's prepared a sort of a PowerPoint to share with us. Afterward, he'll answer some questions. which can all be, you can all submit them through the Zoom chat room. Felix?
Thank you, David.
You're welcome.
Am I able to share my screen? Okay, can you all see this? Yeah? Awesome. Okay. So we're going to start. This presentation is brought to you by Superior Plus Propane and Western Propane Service. Here are our phone numbers on the bottom left side with our websites as well. And today, like David said, we're going to go over pretty much wildfire safety, earthquake safety for you and your propane system. And at the very end, we'll go over, you know, summer season's coming up. We'll go over some barbecue cylinder tips and whatnot. So go ahead and start off. So fire safety, like David was saying, most important thing for, you know, in any emergency situation is the safety of you and your family, right? So you're not a responder. No one expects you to be a responder, be a hero, you know, save the day. So just make sure that you're able to, if needed, evacuate yourself, evacuate your family as swiftly and safely as possible. Try and gather what necessities you can. And if you're able to, you know, protect the welfare of your property or animals, livestock that's on your property as well. Get out and get safe. No evacuation routes in your community. No community ordinances or anything like that pertaining to emergency evacuations. Call numbers, whatever it is. Make sure that you keep yourself up to date. Another thing that will greatly help you is knowing, understanding your propane system. I'll have a slide next where it's actually show you kind of what a propane system looks like. You know, when a wildfire comes, you know, it comes slowly, but it comes surely. And we're sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes we're able to help eliminate that source of fuel, which is your propane system. So knowing key components of your propane system is very important. If you have a two-stage system, you'll have a regulator at your tank and a regulator at your house. And the regulator at your house will actually have a shutoff where you can manually shut off the propane to your house, eliminating any propane in the lines to your appliances or in your house. And also there's a service valve on the tank that supplies propane to your service line. So if you're able to know those components and know the equipment, your propane equipment, you'll be able to shut those off. Another thing is keeping the area around and above your tank clear of brush and debris and overhead tree limbs. Anytime that there's a fire, right, there's what's called the fire triangle. So oxygen, fuel, and a source of ignition. That's what's needed to sustain a fire. And obviously, you already have oxygen. You already have the source of ignition if a wildfire is coming. So eliminating extra fuel for that fire is, you know, only going to help. And I think I've seen on your Kern County Fire Council Facebook, you guys actually have some kind of property cleanup, and that's probably one of the things that you guys take care of. Just making sure that, you know, brush and debris is not underneath your tank. You know, clearing weeds will burn up your tank. Overhead tree limbs as well. So when a fire comes in contact with your tank actually builds up pressure, and on that tank there's a pressure relief valve. And I say overhead tree limbs or, you know, other debris or obstructions, because when the propane tank releases propane through that pressure relief valve, that's what it's designed to do. So once that propane releases, the propane will just burn out until there isn't any more propane. But sometimes when there's obstructions to that safety relief valve, the pressure will actually keep building and building and building. And if you see on this little picture of the tank, there is a two heads and a shell and the body of it. So there's only three pieces. One of those pieces will pop off. So if you're able to clear the area around your tank from anything that can fall on that pressure relief valve, it's only going to help matters. You're going to alleviate the situation of having a projectile rather than, you know, just flame burning off. So definitely make sure if you can, to keep any tree limbs or anything above your tank away, because sometimes those will burn and those will fall out right in your tank, and they greatly impact the amount of destruction a tank can do in a wildfire. You should also know where your tank is located, be able to identify where the piping is going from the tank all the way to your house. And again, like I said, know where your shutoffs are. Here you see, this is a picture of a tank. And you see here, this is the service valve. So the service valve will have a pigtail, which is just a small copper brass fitting that'll go into the regulator. And this feeds the propane vapors to your service line. And this is simply just a hand wheel. So just knowing, if you never have seen or went out to your propane tank, it can be kind of scary or overwhelming. Hey, I don't know what this is. I don't know what that does. This is as easy as turning off this hand wheel. So you just turn it to your right, just like anything else, right? And you turn something off, and that'll eliminate the propane fuel source to your house. So that'll greatly limit the amount of damage in your house. If there isn't a great fuel source in your home or any propane line, that's only going to help in the case or an event of a wildfire. Here is a diagram of a house, right? So you see your tank. You see there's usually a regulator from the service valve. There's an underground line, and then it pops back up, and that's what services your house. So there's either another regulator or just a riser, and it goes to piping your house. And it's just good to know where that stuff's at. So if you ever have any questions, you can always call your propane provider. We know we're not your only propane provider in the area, but we want to give you this as much information. So if you have any questions, feel free to call whenever. Another thing that can help is knowing the smell of propane. If you know the smell of propane, you're able to identify leaks in your propane system. Not every propane system is perfect, right? There's always going to be the potential for something to be leaking, or a fitting to come loose, or an appliance that was moved and reconnected. So it's good to know the smell of propane, and it's good to be able to differentiate that and the smell of, let's say some roadkill or a dead animal or something like that. The additive in propane is ethyl mercaptan, and it kind of has a smell of rotten eggs. It's very distinct. If you've smelled it before, you definitely know the smell. But sometimes you might not know or be able to identify that specific smell. So it's good to know that, and it's good to know that whenever you do smell propane, you should immediately leave the premises, leave your house, call your propane provider, and let them know, hey, I smell gas, because that's an emergency situation. Anytime there's a smell of propane, that means that propane is potentially leaking. And even if it's not leaking, at least we have we know that we'll go out and check it and make sure that everything's safe. You should know your propane provider's phone number, keep it readily available. Communicate any changes in usage or appliances. If your tank is turned off for any reason by us, it's locked off, definitely do not try to turn that tank off, turn on. Don't try to break the lock off. Don't attempt to reattach your line to another cylinder, because when there's an interruption of propane, a leak check is needed to put your propane system back into service. And failure to do a leak check, correct leak check, can have the potential to cause significant injury, fatalities, casualties. So whenever you see a tank locked off, it's locked off for a reason. You just call your propane provider and let them know, hey, I just moved in, or whatever the reason is, or if you need to get something fixed. It's not just by us wanting to lock it off or whatnot, but there's regulations and code that we are required to lock it off in certain instances, or when we need to go out and fix something. So if there's a leak, we'll lock it off if we can't find the leak. If there's a move-in or between two customers, we got to lock it off, make sure there's no propane in the system when there's no one, for a long period of time. We need to lock that tank off. So there's many different reasons. Just always call your propane provider and figure out what the remedy is for that. If you change, add, or remove an appliance, always let your propane provider know. This is detrimental to not only us estimating your usage for propane deliveries to make sure you have propane, but it also helps to indicate if there's a leak that neither us or the customer knows about. So if your usage goes up because you had a baby, there's extra people in the house, if you've changed an appliance, let us know. That way we can add it to your account, and that way we know what's causing your gas usage to go higher, if it's going higher over a certain period of time. And if you haven't changed anything and your gas usage is going up, then that means that there's potentially a leak. So that's something to be aware of and keep notice of. And that's also something you can check on your tank as well, on this little gauge. So if you don't have a monitor on your tank, which helps out a lot in defining usage on your tank, you can always check your gauge. If you're a will call customer, a load customer, you probably already know how to check your gauge, but it's important to know how to do that. Let's see. And like I said, if there's any time where you feel like there's a leak, or you think that you smell propane, or you change an appliance, we have to go out and do a leak check. A leak check pressure tests the system all the way from the service valve, so it tests our equipment all the way to your appliances, and then that gas has to hold in the line for a certain period of time, and that tells us, hey, there aren't any leaks, and leaks are easily identifiable through that leak check, and also by you smelling, right? So here are some pictures of a wildfire. This is actually from up north at another location we have in Sweeson City, Sheldon Gas. These tanks went through wildfire. They had a wildfire, I think in the summer or in the fall of last year. And you can see here the damage is crazy. If you see here on the left, that tank has a bunch of brush. You can see they went to recover the tank, and they had to mark it no good because that tank is severely damaged. There is a I guess a certain parameters of what damage you can do to your tank. These are obviously, or do to your tank before you can put it back into service. These tanks are obviously junk tanks now. This one on the left, obviously there's a lot of brush, so that might have attributed to the tank being junked. This one on the right, you can see there's not really much, maybe just overhead limbs, but the damage that wildfires can do is insurmountable. Here's another propane system. You can see it's all charred up. All this ground's all charred up. Here's another tank. This tank actually, this might have been where the pressure relief was. Actually, it looks like it's right here. This tank split. There's not even a seam here. The tank just built up pressure. This don't be deceived by this saying good. There's a no on this left side, but this is something that happens when the tank pressure builds up and it's not able to relieve enough through the pressure relief valve. It'll split the tank. And the tank's not, it's a sturdy propane steel tank, but it's not that thick because you still have to be able to transport the tank. And so, not that it's weak in any way, but it is the ability for it to split. You can see how thin that wall is. So keep that in mind. Now we'll move on to earthquake safety. Let's see. As we all know, earthquakes are common in California, and Kern County is very close to San Andreas and Garlock faults, with lots of little faults in between. Earthquakes not only cause damage to your home and property, but have the potential to damage your propane system. So it could damage the piping between your tank and your house. It can damage the footing of the tank itself. It can damage appliance lines. You can damage regulators and propane risers. So it's important to know your propane system, because then you're able to say, hey, this is out of place, or this looks out of place. So earthquakes are, they damage property, but with propane, it has a potential to cause other hazardous events like a fire. So it's, I wouldn't say it's very common, but that's a very common hazardous situation caused by an earthquake. Your propane system is moved somehow, and there's a leak that's sprouted. You don't know about it. There's gas building up where your water heater closet is. and that's enough to, you know, ignite the fire. So important to know, important to call your propane provider and have them check. You know, it's your propane provider's duty to ensure your safety. So whenever you feel unsafe or whenever there's a disaster situation that takes place, make sure to call your propane provider. Make sure that, you know, you have the calm of mind from through your propane provider checking your system and whatnot. So always feel free to call them. Propane is a non-reactive chemical. It's under pressure in your tank. An earthquake itself won't cause your propane to build up pressure, but earthquakes can knock your tank off its foundation. So a tank can even fall on its side, pulling the pigtail. If the tank falls on its side, it's going to pull your whole line. It's so heavy, it's going to easily pull your underground line. There's going to be a leak if that happens. So make sure that you're aware. Make sure you're able to see if there's a difference in your tank, and you're able to see and check where that's at. I got someone in the waiting room. Should I admit them?
Oh, I'll do.
Yeah. And in the event of an earthquake, you know, if you're able to, like I said, if you feel comfortable with your system and the components, you can go out there and turn your gas off. That's going to save you the worry of anything happening in your house. You'd actually be able to enter your house if there wasn't any, you know, like extensive damage to your home where you thought, you know, something was going to cave in. But if you're able to go out and turn off that gas before going in, that's going to help you out a lot. Even if you turn off the gas and you still smell gas in the house, obviously stay out, call your propane provider. But in the event that there wasn't a smell of propane, you go in and you see your appliances are fine or aren't any leaks, or you're able to turn the shut off at the house off, or even just the tank, that should be fine as well. That'll give you a little peace of mind if you're waiting in the house for someone to come out to fix your tank or put it back on its blocks. Another thing is to make sure to eliminate all sources of emission after any earthquake and changing your appliances. So, let me see, sorry. Check your appliances for any propane odor. Like I said, the lines can move, lines can pull. So in the event of an earthquake, make sure you do a sniff test around your appliances. Make sure there aren't any leaks. Make sure piping is not bent. Make sure nothing's kinked. Recognize and know your propane system. That's going to be the best thing for you. In the event of an earthquake, obviously you're going to probably call your propane provider anyways, but just knowing your propane system, being able to identify changes, abnormalities in your piping will tremendously decrease the potential for a catastrophic event. And be aware, just like the fire safety, be aware of the potential obvious that can fall in your tank. Any overhead debris, any overhead tree limbs, equipment, you know, you got pallets sitting on your tank, whatever. Be aware of those objects because they can potentially block your pressure relief valve or hit a valve on a tank, and then you got a leaking tank. So eliminating those things will greatly reduce the likelihood of a fire, of the propane leaking from your tank. So, and then that's it for earthquake safety. With the summer season coming up, you know, warmer weather is upon us, or will soon be upon us, and you know, a lot of us maybe not have been using our grills or heating appliances outside. So before we start, if we haven't in a while, inspect the integrity of your tank and positioning of your cooking or heating appliance. Make sure you're cooking or heating in an open area that's free of any potential fire hazards or smoke or carbon monoxide can build up. Carbon monoxide is a byproduct of the combustion of propane. Propane is a clean burning fuel, but obviously there are byproducts that can build up in an area. So make sure you're in an open area. Make sure there aren't any sources of, you know, of ignition or fuel sources for ignition. If something were to happen, if there was a fire, you know, you want to be away from your house or any, you know, piles of wood or whatnot. And connecting your tanks, make sure you inspect your tank, because most likely your appliance is going to be okay, but your tanks can weather very easily under your barbecue cylinders. Check your tank's inner seal, the O-ring. If that O-ring is hard or if it's cracked, you're going to have the potential for leaks when you connect your fitting from your appliance. Cracked or hard O-ring can make it so your connection to your grill or cooking appliance isn't as tight as it needs to be, and there's a potential for a leak. When you connect your appliance, ensure that your hose is straight and tight. If your hose used to be flexible and now it's hard and rigid, probably time to replace that hose. Hoses are very easily cracked once they get hard and rigid. So make sure that if something doesn't look right, to just go ahead and go change it. Go to the appliance store and get that hose or fitting replaced. Now that your tank is connected, when you put your connection on, make sure you put this connection right here. Make sure you put that on straight and as tight as possible. This connection is a right-hand thread, so a normal thread, and the thread's on the outside of the valve. But there's also those connections where it's it's called a POL fitting. It'll go inside this service valve, and it's a left-handed thread. So make sure you know which thread is which when you're applying or when you're connecting your hose or your regulator. If your connection isn't tight and straight, your appliance may not work. It's designed not to work if the connection isn't tight. So if it senses a leak in the system, it will not let gas out, right, or through the regulator. The service valve on the barbecue cylinders, they have a safety, and also this fitting right here is called the QCC fitting, and it also has a safety. So if one doesn't like what's going on, it's gonna snap shut and won't let gas through. So make sure your connections are always straight and tight. Once you've connected your tank, create a soapy solution if possible. Soap down your connection at your tank all the way up until the hose goes to the appliance. Slowly turn on your tank. Whenever you connect your tank and whenever you turn it on, always slowly turn it on, because like I said, sometimes these valves, they're a little finicky and they'll shut off real quick, and then you won't get any gas. You'll have just gone to fill your tanks and you're like, hey, what the heck? I can't get any gas out. So if that happens to you, just make sure that you close your tank all the way, and you got to crack it up real slow. And then once it's open, you open slow in a few turns. You can open it all the way. I personally don't open all my tanks all the way. I open them a few turns just in case sometimes the valves reseat and it kind of seems like the valve closes. So just make sure that if you have an issue with your tank not opening, close the tank, disconnect your fitting, reconnect it, and then crack that valve open real slow. Always make sure your tank and appliance are on a good level foundation. Sometimes this will have an effect as well on the functionality of your propane cylinder and your appliance. Always follow your manufacturer's lighting instructions if possible. I know the starters always go out, so if you're using a stick lighter or something, just make sure you're being safe. Make sure you have your gas on the lowest setting. And if you're having trouble, maybe take it to the appliance store to get it checked out. Never leave your cooking or heating appliance unattended while in use. If you're cooking with propane, you gotta be close to it. You can't just step away and leave it on for unattended for long periods of time. You never know when something can happen. So it's good to be able to go out there and remedy a situation just by turning the tank off, turning the fuel source off. Also, a big no-no, and something that happens very common, but this is something that you should never do, is never store your propane cylinders indoors, and try to keep your propane cylinders out of direct sunlight during warmer seasons. On these tanks, on this back part, it's called the pressure relief valve, just like it is on the residential tanks. This right here, this little back part, is for relieving propane. So if your tank is indoors and it's warmer, it has a potential to release, thus releasing propane vapor into wherever indoors you have it. And propane is heavier than air, so it will settle on the ground, and it likes to crawl in small places. So make sure that you don't store it indoors, and make sure you don't store it in direct sunlight. Easy remedy for your propane relief valve going off and releasing propane is just putting it in a cool area outdoors, free of anyone, free of any sources of ignition. Definitely let it reseat. Those are designed to release when there's too much pressure built up in the tank, and then they'll reset. They should reset themselves. If your propane tank doesn't reset, there's an issue with the valve, and you got to change the tank out. When you're soaping down your tank, if you see bubbles at all, that means that there's a leak. There's propane coming through. So that's something you got to change. Be looking out for when you soap down your tanks. If you get those AmeriGas or Blue Rhino exchange tanks, or any type of exchange tank, they usually come with a plastic sleeve on the tank. You must remove those plastic sleeves whenever you get those. Those plastic sleeves are, for branding, and they also use them for their combination labels for NFPA and their UN number. But those plastic coverings, when you go home, they just trap dirt, they trap water, and they'll rust your tank. They'll rust the belt of the tank. Your tank is probably the thickness of the shell of the tank, probably about the thickness of your collar, so very thin. So if you think about it, your tank's corroding. It's going to be corroding a very thin. It's going to be corroding a very thin portion of the tank, and it's only how much corrosion would you really want on something that thin that's holding propane. Let's see. If your tank is old, you got an old tank, most likely it's not going to be able to be filled. If you have a tank that doesn't have these outside threads on the valve, and it's an older tank, unless it's a horizontal tank that's an RV, that tank's not going to be able to get filled. You can get a new valve put in there, but it's probably best just to go get another exchange tank. They'll take your tank, and then I think you only pay somewhere around between $20 and $30. So it has gas in it too, so that's a pretty good deal. You never want to use something that you're worried about, or a dented, rusted, gouged tank. You might as well just go and exchange that tank. The cost of exchanging a tank, something like that, it's very minimal for your safety. Let's see. If you put your tank on the ground when you're grilling, or if it's outside, make sure you don't leave it on the ground or dirt or wet areas, because again, rust and corrosion will start to come up on your tank, on the foot of the tank or underneath the tank. And it's always good to inspect the integrity of your tank not every time you use it, but every time you start putting it into service. So if you're a summer griller or whatever, always check your tank before the start of the season. If you need to get an exchange tank or change your tank out, go ahead and do that. That's about it. For a lot of these sources of information for propane, you can find on propane.com. It's easy as that. The Propane Education Research Council, or PERC, they do a lot of the research for the regulation of the codes of propane. They set standards of propane safety and service and delivery. So we actually have our guys go through classes on their website to be a certified employee. It's called a certified employee training program that they do. So we get a lot of our information from PERC. It's a great resource. If you want to go and look on that website, they have tons of information on pretty much everything. So if you're doing a new build, if you want to look up earthquake, wildfire, winter, snow safety, anything like that, you can always find it on propane.com. You can go anytime if you want to learn more about propane and see the different uses of propane or any season. That's a great resource to use. And that's the end of my slide.
Wow, thank you. That was great. There's a lot of information. I know that there's probably a scabillion questions. I know that I have 2 or 3 that just occurred to me. So, but Julia, you probably have a list. So why don't you begin? Questions for Felix?
Okay, I've got some. You don't want to go ahead and ask your questions first?
Oh, I will. How long does a tank last?
Good question.
What kind of tank? Like a residential tank or a cylinder tank?
Well, just probably what I'm concerned with is my barbecue tank.
Okay, so your barbecue tank, it's regulated. All barbecue tanks are regulated by the Department of Transportation because they're over-the-road tanks, and so you can get your tank requalified if you can find a requalifier in your area, and it's 12 years from the manufacturer date on your tank. So that's how long it's good for. They're potentially good for longer, but you just have to get them requalified. And most of the time, it's the least costly way of requalifying is visual inspection, and we do that. We're not currently doing that at our Lebec plant, but we will be probably sometime this year. We'll probably be doing that again, and maybe even at the Tehachapi plant once that's up and running.
Okay.
But it's 12 years, and then if you do a visual inspection, it's another 5 years.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So you'll see that date on there. It'll be a 2-digit month and a 2-digit year. And 12 years from that, that's when it's expired.
Let's do this. Okay. And it's written on stamped in the tank, right?
Yep, it's stamped on the tank, and that's a good thing about the exchange tanks. It doesn't matter the state of your tank; you can always go exchange it. So you go out over to Home Depot, Walmart, or whatnot. You can go get an exchange tank. I think here it's like $23.99 or something like that, and it comes with I think they fill it with 15 pounds of propane. So it's like
3.5 gallons.
3.5 gallons. Yep. So it's a great way to just save yourself the time of going to take it and getting tested and whatnot, and just getting another tank.
Just easier.
Yeah, definitely.
Is propane gas, is it corrosive? So if I have a tank sitting on the ground, does the tank work on itself as well as the moisture on the ground to rust
No,
it? Or
propane is not corrosive.
not corrosive?
And the ethylmorcaptan as well. That's in the tank as an additive.
Uh-huh. Now in LA County, they have. I lived in Van Nuys, and you had to get a earthquake shutoff valve, that the movement of the ground would drop a little ball into the way of the gas. Is that efficacious in small communities or for private tanks? Is that a deal or is that an odd deal?
No, you can do that. We don't have, and Tom probably knows this a little more better than me, but you can get those installed. We don't carry them, but we don't, we have a few installations that probably use them, mostly for like if they have what's called operation where they have a source of ignition nearby. They'll have us install a earthquake safety valve so that if they're in the event that there was a release of propane, there wouldn't be a catastrophic event. But we don't normally install those, but you could buy those yourselves and have us install them.
Right, but it's not like a requirement coming down the pike or anything.
No, not anytime soon. No.
There are some insurers that do recommend earthquake valves in some residential applications for getting a policy, updating or upgrading a policy in certain locations. I've had experience with only a couple, not too many, but a couple different situations where insurers were requesting an earthquake valve be installed at an installation for residential service.
Okay, great. That's all my questions are answered. Julia, you're up.
Okay, so what we're going to do, we're going to have a little change up here because Andrew Freeborn from the fire department has to leave as soon as he's done with his presentation. So we're going to go ahead and move to his presentation now, and then we'll come back to Q&A after he's done speaking.
Okay, in addition to that, if you have a question that doesn't get answered, you can put it on into the Zoom chat, and if it doesn't get answered, it will be on the website too. So, but our next guest is Andrew Freeborn of Kern County Fires. He's their PIO, the Public Information Officer. Right. And he also has good information on propane safety, and he's been our guest a number of times here on the webinar. And
This
and
is the fire.
he'll talk later
We're not on it.
about the
But you can hear
questions.
it.
Okay, Andrew, please.
Wait, will everybody please mute themselves? We're hearing some chatter in the background. Thank you. Take it away, Andrew.
Thank you so much. Much appreciated. So I know that we're here talking about propane safety. The only thing I could even begin to add to that incredible presentation is some of the things that we run into as firefighters, and that is when individuals go to transport their propane tanks. We see that sometimes there are fires that are started from brakes or what have you, and trailers and other things. Individuals are carrying heavy loads in their vehicles and things may not be secured properly. So on top of everything that Felix wonderfully provided for us by way of information today, just also be careful when we are transporting these things. Try not to transport them in an open vehicle where that gas that's leaking could cause you to maybe pass out while driving your vehicle. It's best off to secure them in the bed of the truck. Make sure they're not falling out going down the road, and continue to apply some of those things that Felix had said. I know that in the near future we will be speaking specifically on other matters of safety, and that would be matters of communication. But I would just like to share my screen here with you. If anyone's wanting continued information on a variety of these topics that we have discussed recently, even some of the things that have been discussed here today, one place that you can go, it's easy to remember, kerncountyfire.org. From the kerncountyfire.org website, you will be able to go to the Community Connect portal. You will be able to go to the Ready Kern portion. You can even see from the website itself full information about the hazard reduction programs, the frequently asked questions. You can also, from that, get additional safety information, preparedness information. You're able to see directly from the website what we also share in the Twitter feed, which oftentimes we'll have emergency information in this as well. So I know we're talking about preparing. We're thinking a lot about preparing around our properties, around our propane tanks. Let's continue to keep in mind that, as we see here from one of these last tweets, there's no longer the ability for open burning, but we still need to continue working at reducing that hazardous vegetation on our properties, including around our propane tanks and other areas. The deadline is fast approaching, which will be June 1st. So please continue to do all of the wonderful things that you're doing in the community. We're always so proud of everyone in these communities throughout Kern County. We see the individuals that are tuning in here today, members of our community that live here, they work here. They're concerned not only for themselves, they're concerned for their neighbors and our communities, the overall health, and everyone should be commended for what they're doing. The fact that we're asking these questions and looking to improve and continue to have safe environments.
Here, here.
Well, that's it for Andrew, right? Andrew, you're leaving us, right?
Short and sweet. I'm sorry, but I'm in the middle of some incident activity, so I'm trying to be helpful.
You're the public information officer, and it's not for us. It's for everybody.
Yes.
Thank you so much for being here. Really,
Thank you, Andrew. We really appreciate it.
No problem. Thank you once again for inviting the Kern County Fire Department. Thank you, Felix, and all that wonderful information. That is great stuff. And we look forward to seeing everyone on the next one of these meetings.
Good.
Thank you. All right, so we're going to go back to Q&A now.
Okay.
Brace yourself, Felix. Have I got questions for you?
Oh,
And
man.
if anybody watching has questions, please put them in the chat. I'm checking the chat. There's questions there already, and I've got a whole list of questions I've been collecting. So, Felix, I know you and Thomas are aware that a lot of us have perceptions that we get falsely or not from the movies. And you see in the movies often people are moving these propane tanks and they roll over and boom, they explode. Is my tank going to explode?
Your tank will, it's designed not to explode. So there are instances like I had mentioned earlier when the pressure relief valve, isn't, or the propane tank itself isn't able to relieve that pressure, that it'll burst. And, if there's a lot of propane in there, it would be a ball of flame. But these are designed by, it's called ASME, American Scientific Mechanical Engineers, American Society of Mechanical Engineers. And they design these tanks to certain schematics and parameters, and the tank is designed not to explode. So it's designed to relieve itself, and the propane will just burn off. So contrary to the movies in Hollywood, they're not designed to explode.
Exactly. So you're saying for sure if there's an earthquake and the stand that the tank is on, if it breaks or cracks or something, we're not going to have a big explosion.
No, you won't. But if something like that were to happen, I would immediately go if I was able to and I felt comfortable, go to my tank and shut off that propane, that fuel source into my home, because you never know if like you said, if the foundation or something broke like that, you definitely want to eliminate that fuel source into your home. So I definitely turn my tank off and I called up your propane provider.
Okay, good advice. Okay, so you talked a little bit about what happens if there's actually the smell related to a gas leak, how you tell if there's a gas leak. But what can we expect if there is a gas leak and we have that smell? But sometimes I've heard people say, oh, it smells like skunk, or you said it smells like rotten eggs. And how do you know? Like, you smell the smell, but you're not sure what the smell is or where it's from. What should you do? And also in this conversation, could you talk about gas detectors and carbon monoxide detectors?
So the way you can tell is, you really can't. So you either know the smell or you don't. But the safest thing for yourself and, as a propane provider, we want you to be peace of mind at all times. So if you do feel like you smell propane, call your propane provider. It's, our duty to go out there and remedy any situation. Check for leaks if you're smelling gas. That's a emergency call for us. Whatever our service technicians or delivery bobtail drivers are doing, they will immediately stop and they'll head over right to an out of gas call or a leak smell of gas. So that's very important to us, to your safety and your peace of mind, your family's safety. So definitely just call if you think you smell gas, definitely call your propane provider. We do have the ability to take you out to a tank when you first, start service. So if we're out there, we can vent a little propane out for you to smell. Obviously, wait for the valve to close. You can smell that smell and kind of be aware of that, or what that smells like. And what was the second part of that question?
So I wanted you to talk about installing gas detectors and carbon monoxide detectors.
Tom might know more about installing gas detectors and carbon monoxide. I know you can get carbon monoxide detectors installed in your home. Those are I think they're pretty readily available. And I think even the fire department would have a lot of information on that as well, as far as detectors go. So that's a possibility. Propane in itself, in your home, carbon monoxide buildup isn't a huge issue, right? But it is an issue. So you could get those if you wanted to be extra safe. Get those installed.
The point where you have some issues with carbon monoxide buildup would be a faulty heater. It's not burning correctly. You're getting some gases that aren't normally there. Home Depot, Walmart, Lowe's, they all sell those carbon monoxide detectors. It is a good idea to have them in at least 2 to 3 main areas of your house where you have a lot of traffic. Bedrooms, specifically the hallways leading to bedrooms, just as a just as for peace of mind, just like you would a smoke detector.
Okay.
That brings up another point, like Tom was saying, a faulty heater or a faulty burner of some sort. That's why it's always, if you change your appliance or anything like that, it's good to call your provider to go out there and do a leak check, because we also check and light your appliances. So when we go to light your appliance and we see that it's a faulty burner or something like that, or there's some other smells, we can address it then. Sure, get an appliance guy out there to fix your appliance or whatnot. And that's also another reason for you to be very familiar with the propane system and your appliances, to be able to tell the differences.
Great. Okay, so on to the next question. Should your propane tanks in your yard be tied down like you would do a water heater?
Is it propane like your residential tank or your,
Like out in the yard, you have the big propane tank that you come and fill up. Should they be strapped down somehow, or are they, when they're on the stand, are they automatically locked down?
I can answer that, Felix, if you like.
Yeah, go ahead.
So I think the person may be asking because in the Midwest and the East Coast, there are a lot of tanks that are strapped to the ground, either with an augered style anchoring point, or they're anchored to a concrete pad because of flooding and runoff in certain areas. There may be a situation where the potential for having that tank, in a catastrophic situation, get run off down the river. Say if it's near a riverside. Again, that would be at the behest of the homeowner. Those kits are available, and they're available in either a what you would call an auger style ground mounted system, or a concrete anchoring system. They do use them in some applications for earthquakes, but again, there aren't a whole lot in California.
Okay, perfect. Okay, next question. Okay, so these tanks, like where we are in Pine Mountain Club, they have to be enclosed in like a wooden box or something. So, and I know that's for aesthetics, that's not for safety, but is it a good idea to have a covering over that to keep the leaves out?
So that's a great question. That is a big no-no. That's a huge safety liability, having your tank closed. For safety reasons, if you're it's actually illegal by code as well to have your tank covered. So that's one thing. And then also, if there was a leak on your tank, you wouldn't be able to tell until the delivery driver came by. People start stacking stuff on top of their tank, or I got a cover on there already. Might as well throw this, pallet or these tools on top as well, and then it becomes a storage space. And so so that's definitely not a great idea. It is against NFPA 58 code, which is the codes governing propane tanks. So
in Pine Mountain Club, there are some that have roofs, but they're open. I think the distinction that Felix is trying to point out is you can't just put a lid on top of your enclosure. Mm-hmm. You have to it has to be ventilated in some way.
Yeah, if you have the four sides and you put a roof on, you made your tank a house. So
it could be like an A-frame with the ends open.
But still, you would want it above and open. You wouldn't want it just an A-frame opening. Okay. You've got to give more air space. And then the other thing is, especially on those open air enclosures, you do want to make sure that you are keeping debris out on a periodic basis as good maintenance. Mm-hmm. Especially in the mountain communities. Most of the tanks are in an area where the leaves and the pine needles are falling, and they can build up, and they can create a space where moisture can build up at the bottom of the tank, and you want to avoid that at all costs.
Yeah, that's interesting. This is pine cone season where the pine cones like just keep falling out of the tree and hit the roof all night long and whatever else is around it. So yeah, it's a good idea to, I heard you earlier say to trim the trees over the tank. I think
Yes, if possible. I mean, obviously, you know, if you're not able to, you know, do it yourself or you know, shell out the money, then it is what it is. But if you're able to, that's always a great idea.
Yeah. Okay, so is propane safe for the environment?
So that is a great question, especially with, you know, solar becoming bigger and bigger. Propane is, I can't think of the word. It's non-aqueous. So propane cannot saturate in the water because propane just evaporates. So it's safe for the environment in that it's you know, not a non-reactive chemical. It's only characteristics of being a dangerous chemical is obviously it being a fuel source and being a skin irritant. Propane boils at negative 44 degrees Fahrenheit. So once propane hits the atmosphere at, you know, any temperature, it's going to evaporate. So it is safe for the environment, but any type of combustion of fossil fuels is obviously going to let off some carbon dioxide. So it is cleaner than obviously a lot of other fuel sources like butane and gasoline. So and it packs a pretty good punch. A gallon of propane burns 91,000 BTUs. So it's pretty
Yes.
strong for its ratio of gallons to output.
Okay. All right, and a couple more things here. So I know you addressed the barbecue tank, but I'm wondering if it's okay to leave the tank out in the wintertime, like attached to the barbecue.
Do that. That actually might be a safer place for it if you think about it. Your tank's going to be above the ground, so it's not going to be touching the wet snow. And, you know, if there's snow that gets in there, then, you know, obviously it's going to be touching snow, but at least it's in a compartment where it's off the ground and inside a compartment with the door. So if it's like that, then I would say so, definitely. Just make sure that your tank, whenever your tank is not in use, you got to turn your valve all the way closed. Anytime you're done using it, always turn your tank all the way closed. Make sure your tanks are always upright. Like I said, those pressure relief valves on the back of the valves. If the tank's on its side, then that liquid propane is going to go into that vapor space, and it's going to block the relief valve from opening if needed to.
Well, what happens if the tank sits there in the snow? If it's not?
Nothing will happen, but it'll start to build up rust or corrosion on the outside of the tank, on the shell. And it's usually definitely, you see it on the bottom of the tank, inside the foot ring. You'll see those. That's probably the most common area of where a tank sits in a wet environment. You'll see a lot of pitting and corrosion starting to happen in that foot of the tank. And then not only that, the tank is required by law, by DOT, to have a foot ring. So if that foot ring is deteriorating, it's bent or misshapen in any way, and it's not able to stand up right, then that's going to be something that's going to take it out of service.
Okay. I have another question about the tank. Is it possible, if you have a tank and you see it's rusted, but there's gas in it, is it possible to transfer the gas from one tank to another?
If it's a barbecue cylinder, you technically can do that, but it's a very tedious way of doing it. If I were you, if I had a rusty tank, and I think if I had been using it and I thought it was okay, I would probably use the tank up, and then once that tank was done, I would take it to an exchange tank place of Walmart, Home Depot, and I would exchange that tank out. That way I can get a newer tank, a tank that's been tested more recently without any rust. And that way you don't have to worry about it. That's probably the easiest way to get rid of any older rusted tanks. But I would say you're going to pay a lot more money for the work to exchange gas from one cylinder to another rather than using it or exchanging it for another tank.
Okay. And I have one other thing I would like you to address, and that's those little propane heaters that they're saying are good indoors. Is that true? Are they good indoors? And do you have one that you would recommend over the others?
Tom, you
Tom,
know,
looks like you
Yeah,
want
I was,
are you talking about the small
the Mr.
vented
Buddy. I think they're called Mr.
direct vent
Buddy.
heaters?
They're called Mr. Buddy heaters or something like
Oh no, those are not good for indoor use.
that. Okay.
Those I would not recommend. Those are those ones with the two burners. In some cases, maybe a single burner. As some of them have a little bigger rectangular, and they screw right into the barbecue bottle. Is that what you're talking about?
I don't
yeah,
know.
I think they see, yeah, they like Tom saying, they sit like right above the valve. Those are
Yeah.
mostly used like maybe in big warehouses or shops, but indoors in a home, yeah, you definitely would not want to use that.
Yeah, you would not want to be using that inside a house.
Okay, because there's one they're pushing, you see commercials for it all the time where it has a safety valve and it has a thing that keeps it from falling over, and they say it's safe in the house, but it makes me nervous.
A propane tank inside your house is never a safe bet.
Okay,
Never, ever, never.
okay, got it.
Just
Thank you. This is really great advice and really good information. So we're done with the questions, David?
Oh, well, I had something else. I was wondering, the gas itself, if it's in the house, it's heavier than air, so it's going to be down low. Now, and CO2 is lighter than it rises, right? I mean, it mixes with the air or it rises. So if you had a gas alarm, would you want to put it down low? And would you put because the CO2 I know can be up high. So, and if propane sinks while it's around and is a danger, would you have a gas alarm low on the wall or something?
Maybe Tom knows this, but I don't know that are there. I don't know that there are propane alarms or
no. There's CO2. There's CO2 detectors. Yeah.
carbon monoxide, right?
Yeah.
So the best bet for any detector for propane itself is just being able to smell it.
Yes.
When we get any when we get any loads of propane, we make sure it's odorized, and for that reason. So you'll be able to smell if there's a substantial leak where it's going to be pulling somewhere. You're going to be able to smell it without a doubt. Even if there's a small leak on a fitting, you should be able to smell it pretty easily. And that's when you want to call. Not when you think, hey, I've been smelling that smell for a week. Call the first aid, because that happens a lot where people think, they mistake it for a dead animal, or their old propane provider told them, hey, don't worry about it. It's probably just a dead animal. So they kind of just put it off, that smell. That smell is, it's an important smell. So for your safety, call your propane provider immediately, have them come out. Worst case scenario, there's no leak. So we just came out there and we're not gonna bill you. We're gonna go back and continue our work for the day. So it's the best detector for the propane is your nose. For carbon monoxide, carbon dioxide, you put those wherever you think that combustion is going to happen, or I would say where the most, like Tom was saying earlier, in big rooms or where the most combustion happens.
Okay.
And lightning strikes, is that ever a danger?
Oh,
Definitely. I mean, well, as much as it is a danger to any of us, right? So the likelihood of it striking the propane cylinder or the propane tank or any line, it's going to be about the same probability of it striking a human being.
There's no higher likelihood of a lightning strike hitting a propane tank as there would be it striking a tree.
Yeah. Okay.
okay. And David, we have one hand up. Ed, if you're still here.
Good.
Yeah, I am still here.
Okay.
Felix, first thank you to you. And I don't know, Tom, are you with Mr. McGinnis? Are you with Western Propane?
Yes, yeah. I'm the territory sales manager.
Oh, okay. So you work close with Woody.
Yes, I do.
Yes.
As a
I was
matter
going
of
to say
fact.
Ed Reith. I know that name.
Yeah, I think I sent you an email. I wanted to tag Felix. We're talking about the installation or the anchoring of home propane tanks, usually anywhere from 250 to 500 gallons or bigger, depending on the resident, right? So Ideally, what I've known in the past, the best installation, we don't see a lot of it up here. I would like to see the NFPA mandate anchoring of tanks, and that would be on a concrete slab with red heads. You know, it'd be anchored, physically anchored to the ground. And of course, a slab, the size or the footprint of the tank, in the event of an earthquake, it's going to shift and move anyway, but at least the tank is attached to it. And now they're doing flex lines or PECs for underground delivery, where you have a tank that is in proximity 10 feet or further away from the home. But for those that do have home tanks, I would advise them to check the installation to see if they're just sitting on concrete blocks or if they're physically anchored to something. Is that not something that Western Propane would recommend on an installation?
Felix?
Yeah, I would say so. Ordinarily, for us as a propane provider, we would like Ed said, we would set them on blocks because that's just like the propane, the common standard, right? But occasionally we do have customers or areas where we need to set a tank where the customer actually has to pour a concrete slab. And in the event that the customer does do that, then we can redhead a tank down if they would like us to.
In most cases, we don't physically anchor the tanks down, but again, situationally, we do. You know, that as that comes up, we do. There is no specific requirement or mandate for that. You know, for securing the tanks to a fixed point in California.
You know, it's not a regular occurrence where you see a levee. God forbid you don't want that.
No.
For those that don't know what a levee is, it is a propane tank or cylinder. In my experience in the fire service, I've only encountered one, and that was a barbecue size cylinder, and that in itself is dangerous enough to see take off across the sky. But I have, and we trained on a number of incidences involving tank cars, train cars, and I'm sure you guys have seen that video because it's an industry standard for training, that leveled a 1 square mile city block.
Yep.
When it took off like a rocket and exploded. But where I was going with that is, even though it's not a regular occurrence, I guess it could be left to the homeowner. I know I'm getting ready to move mine in a few months when I ask you guys to come out, pump it out and move it, but I'm going to have a concrete slab with anchoring pre-drilled according to the footprint on the tank. So
Perfect.
Yeah, I would advise it. And the other tag I wanted, and that had to do with, and Karen, are you still on there? Let's see if she's, yes, she is. Maybe in reference to a question that Julia threw out there with regard to using propane heaters in the house. It might be something worthwhile putting in the newsletter next time we send it out. We talk about, of course, you know, we're not in the winter anymore, but maybe in the fall or something, we can keep track of that and maybe throw it in the form of a comment or something that we can put in the Pine Mountain Club newsletter, the POA newsletter, if that makes sense.
Yeah, not a problem.
Thank you. Thank you. And thank you again, Felix.
No problem. Thank you.
Well, I think that's all we have tonight, folks.
Looks like Tom Yancey has his hand raised.
Oh, Yancey.
I'm here. Can you hear me? Thank you.
Yes, sir.
When we moved here, I was intending to put my tank underground. Was told at that time, 20 years ago, that it was too dangerous, wouldn't do it. So I built a concrete revetment to put the tank on, bolted to that concrete. And it works. That's just what I did. And since I got a new tank in, it no longer fits the older tie downs. So I looked at the fire department and the sawmill communications site, and they use stainless steel cable to do the same thing. So my intention is to put stainless steel cable over that tank to tie it down to the pad. Thank you.
Yep. That will work as well.
Definitely.
That'll work as well.
Great. Well, you don't want to have a wayward tank. Has anybody seen my tank? I can't light a fire. Anyway, well, thank you guys. Thank you, Tom and Felix. Thank you so much, and our thanks to Andrew. It was great information. It was full of stuff to think about. But if you have questions, they occur to you later, ladies and gentlemen, write them into the Zoom or chat or into the Facebook, and they will get back to you as soon as they can. Tonight's topic was propane safety, and you can also get it in written form on the homepage at kernfiresafe.org, and click on the other resources on the homepage and choose propane link, and receive a propane safety brochure from the California Fire Safe Council. June 1st is coming, and we've talked about it a little bit today. Kern Fire Safe Council, we're dedicated to preparing the community to doing what we can for wildfires, as we all should be. KernFireSafe.org is a nonprofit community-based organization, and folks, we could use your help. Please join us, and together, we can do so much. We can get so much accomplished and save our communities, and that's important. Our topic for May next month, a webinar is set for May 25th, and it's going to deal with the disaster preparedness and Kern County's alert systems. So that's all great information, more information to digest. Thank you all for coming today. It's been great. And remember, we're never out of woods. We're never out of the woods when it comes to fire, because we live in the forest. All right. Thank you, and take care.